course, yo-yoing is not good for anyone, right? We didn't know if we were Arthur or Martha at that point. And so then to be told that I could not be available for my kids, there was like this invisible barrier, and I was still being a good girl. Like I'm actually quite a gentle disruptor. I really like to go under the radar with my disruption. I really don't want to be out there, you know, with
In
my
lights.
banner. Yeah.
Banner.
I definitely don't want to do that. I'm like, oh shit, I'm definitely not brave enough for that. But that was a tipping point for me. And I just looked around and I went, is this really, do I consent to this? And I effing do not. And I basically just went, welcome, Quanta folks, to Alchemising Education. This is our little sister podcast with Fark the Shoulds, and Farking the Shoulds underpins why we alchemise education. I am Jodi from QuantiMama.
Hello, everyone, and I'm Kerri from QuantiMama.
Good to be here, peeps. So today we are talking about the tipping point. Keza.
Are we talking about a truck and its tipping point, or are we talking about our tipping point or everyone else's tipping point? Well,
I think it certainly can feel like one of those, what is it, Back to the Future, where there's a truck full of manure, and it can sometimes feel like that tipping point where the truck is full of shit and you do not want to get covered in it, let alone buried.
Oh, yeah.
So the tipping point. We want to talk about the tipping point because obviously a lot of what we talk about is about demystifying homeschooling. We want to demystify homeschooling mainly to, I guess, unpack what it can look like for parents and kids, but really parents, because I think that we're very attached to our certain rhythms and certainly following what feels like the mainstream stream, going with that flow. But that flow can sometimes not be the flow of what our family needs and what our kids need in particular. And so there's a yearning that quietly starts coming up for us about what are the alternatives? Am I allowed to look at the alternatives? And so what we want to do is tease apart what the tipping point was for us today. And it very much is attached to farking the shoulds, because when you decide to start farking life's shoulds or society's shoulds, the tipping points will come fast and furious in all manner of spaces in your life, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about recognising our level of empowerment.
Yeah.
Like where we start to feel like actually we can make a choice around these things. We can actually have a say. And really, you know, I think recognising what our own view is, or our programs around our own education, I think that has been really powerful for me, is to go, when I reflect back on what my education looked like and what it created for me, and perhaps even some of the negative things it created for me. When you start to look at your own education, you kind of go, wow, okay, well, that was great, but that was really shit. So it's around looking at those things as well.
Yeah. I think there's a real usefulness in talking about the real world experiences. I mean, we've said it before and we'll say it again. Well, I am definitely a reluctant homeschooler in the sense that I fantasize about having 6 hours a day to myself. And I, would immediately quit work and I would just find things to do because the kids wouldn't be in the space. But, my life is spent juggling work, juggling commitments with the kids, looking around the house and all the shit that never gets cleaned up because there are 4 people just unpacking things all the time, right? And so if I had have seen this as a life that was being lived when I was reaching my tipping point, would that have changed anything?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I'd probably say no.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually the tipping point.
It is.
Because when you start to realise that life is not going to be perfect.
Yes.
And it will come with its challenges, and you can't, 100% of the time meet everybody's needs, and there has to be the ebb and flow, then you kind of realise you're never going to wait for a perfect scenario.
No.
You can't wait for that perfect scenario because it's never going to happen.
No, there's no such thing as a perfect scenario because in fact when we are just approaching that tipping point is usually when there's the greatest discomfort in our
Yes.
life. And I think that's where we're working in concert with the universe. And so, you can say, okay, when you're living in the quantum space, there's a lot that's done for you as a gift, but sometimes that gift feels like a slap in the face.
Absolutely.
Often.
A lot.
Yeah.
And this is possibly the resistance why people wouldn't even think to go there.
Yeah.
But when we realize or we recognize that the gift isn't actually pushing through a little bit of that discomfort because there's a bigger picture at play and there's little people's lives at play and their needs, are important, then you kind of go, well, we just have to step into the discomfort.
Yes.
Believing that there is greater good that's going to come out of it.
Yeah.
Life is not about being easy.
No, that's right. No, it's actually about having experiences, isn't it?
Correct.
So it's really funny because I think when we floated the idea of this as a topic, I was thinking about how sometimes I feel really unqualified to talk about this stuff, because I think that people who are naturally magnetic in these kind of big life-changing spaces, and I'm thinking about, people like Gabor Mate, Joe Dispenza, and some of these very big voices that are in this space of living a very connected life and actually thinking outside the material, right?
Yep.
I love what both of those gentlemen share in the world, but they have had huge challenges in their life. And so sometimes when you feel like you haven't had the massive life challenge, you almost feel unqualified. And when we were reflecting on this, I said, you know what, the biggest tipping point for me was to realise that I could do something different with my kids' education was when we left the first primary school and we went to the second primary school. And I grew up not knowing anyone who changed schools unless they moved, right? But you certainly didn't stay in your current home without any other change of circumstances and just simply choose to change schools.
No.
Especially in the absence of any kind of difficulty, any obvious bullying or anything like that. And the tipping point for us, and we were in a beautiful little school that just appeared to have all the things that you would want, right? Small community, very community focused, lots of lovely local families, lots of nature around the kids, and, having a small school, you tend to know everyone. The kids knew everyone's name. So it was a lovely community feel. And the tipping point for us was something as minor as a uniform thing, where the girls who had been wearing leggings for, I kid you not, maybe 10 years, at least a whole generation of school kids, a new principal came in and said, no, leggings are not official uniform, and so the girls can't wear that. They can wear the dress or the skirt. And I just looked and went, are you kidding me? They're the only two options? Oh, skort as well, right? So, because I'm thinking about girls doing
cartwheels,
and, getting in there amongst it at lunchtime and, thinking about comfort. And what are they meant to do in winter? Oh, they can wear tights. And, I do not wear tights.
Oh, they are the worst.
They are the worst.
The worst.
They were definitely not invented by a woman when she was needing comfort. High heels and tights, worst combo ever. So men, if you're ever wondering, no, that's why we don't wear them, because they're hideously uncomfortable. And fishnets, and I'm going to go into that. Anyway, so I digress. They look fabulous, but they're very uncomfortable. You get those little imprints on your feet if you wear boots with fishnets.
I've never worn them.
Oh, they're torture.
Are they?
I've done it once. Anyway, so my tipping point was something as minor as whether my daughter could wear leggings to continue to wear leggings to school. But the thing that I think when I looked at how that tipping point went, firstly, it was brought in this kind of totalitarian sort of energy, right? This is not for discussion, this is what's happening. So there was no opportunity to even say our views on it and say, well, can
vote on it
or give a there was no justification for it. It just is what it is. But more than that, I sat in that space of, how am I going to explain this to my daughter? How am I going to explain to her she was in grade 2 or grade 3. How am I going to explain to her that she can't wear something to an institution that is meant to be a space where she's meant to learn, and she'll be feeling uncomfortable. So what happens is, from a consciousness or a neurological perspective, I was thinking, okay, she's now concerned with how she looks. She's concerned with her comfort. So how does that allow for spaciousness for her to learn?
And comfort and security and
all that stuff. I mean,
Yep.
you actually don't want to think about what you're wearing when you're learning something. You want to be so deeply immersed in the subject matter and in the activity that what you look like is just, you already feel comfortable with that. So that was the tipping point for us. And it just sounds so unremarkable, but I thought it was like the iceberg.
Yes.
It was only the little bit that you could see, but I was
Yeah.
like, underneath this, there is a shit ton of issues here. Firstly, the way it was handed down as an edict.
Yeah.
Secondly, no consultation with the kids. So their voice did not count whatsoever. Thirdly, even if you had a reasonable argument that was on behalf of the kids' comfort or well-being issue or whatever you want to call it, that was completely not heard as well. And I just thought, what a strange environment to put my kids in that doesn't create learning. And of course, now I think I've got a very different mindset around it. I can see that the institutions, I think, largely are about control.
Yes.
About control and creating some kind of unilateral understanding within that space, not about individuality. And you know what's crazy about this, Keza, is that the tipping point should, and obviously I'm using that with parentheses, it should have been when I found out that in their art class at this school, the creative art that they were doing was a photocopied sheet that they had to colour in the lines. And they got in trouble with the art teacher if they coloured outside the lines.
Yes.
And I'm like, why wasn't that my tipping point to ask that question?
And they're small things, right? But they just start you to question and get curious about what is it creating?
Yeah.
Like, what's the mindset it's creating in these kids? Where is it keeping them small? Where is it not allowing for them to have a voice, to have a say? And also the other thing I see in that is that there's this perspective about, and I'm sure this word's been put out there to keep us small as parents, helicopter parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you were to go into that, say, into the principal and say, look, I've got a concern about this, you would seen as being a parent that's probably helicoptering, that's not the right word, but, just sort of interfering.
Yeah.
Interfering in something that seems insignificant.
Yes.
But it's actually, when you look at it deeper and deeper around just the small things, it's all the small things that lead to the big stuff, isn't it?
But did you have a bigger tipping point for you?
Well,
Do you remember what your first change was of going, option C?
Yeah, I think when you just feel like you don't get a choice in things, it's like when you get given option A and B and you're meant to be grateful for those options.
Yeah.
I think it's and I'm trying to think, mine might have been bigger around that. But when you kind of go, okay, well, you could do option A or B, but actually what about option C? And I really feel like there's something in our society where you just don't even get given an option C.
Yeah.
And that is to keep us small.
Yeah.
And to keep us not questioning, to keep us not saying, hey, I've got an issue here. We just don't want to be one of those annoying parents.
No, but by the same token, what that shows up when you have a concern about something is that there is a larger thing at play. And I mean, I think this is endemic through society. We are not curious enough. Like, there's this intentional thing where the whole thing is this snowball of busyness. I'm too busy to even raise this as an issue, or I'm too busy to hear your concern because it's trivial. Right.
Or again, we're just not qualified.
Oh, not qualified.
It's that not qualified that gets me, I think.
Couldn't possibly understand.
We don't get it. We're not teachers, we're not working in the system. So therefore we don't get it.
Yeah.
And we don't have a say.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing that really when I look at what it was that possibly took us into the homeschooling environment, it was really around the stress that our children faced in the classroom. It was really around seeing that their needs as an individual was not important over the system's need to have grades and to assess and to follow a very standard curriculum, even if it didn't follow the needs of the child or the interests of the child. So when I started sort of seeing all of those things, it's like the individuality was taken away and the ability to have a voice was taken away. I think it's that voice for me where you just don't get a say.
Yeah.
You just don't get a say.
I do wonder if one of your tipping points is in like literally that moment when the penny dropped for you. I know you've had a few, but one of them might have been when your son said school is so inefficient.
Well, yeah, because he
called it out,
he
right?
called it out,
Yeah.
and it was really powerful because he said to me, "Mum, why do I want to sit in this classroom and listen to for 50 minutes to the teacher talking and then get given homework at the end of the day?" He just said it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that was a big tipping point. And that's when I recognized that these kids can learn in a far less time in their own time. And I could see that, this efficiency because the teachers had to cater for the average.
Absolutely.
But then you've got both ends of the scale that still their needs are not being met. So it's actually, they say it's for efficiency, but it's actually very inefficient. So when he said, I just want to go home and then kick the ball in the afternoon when I get home.
Yeah.
I don't want to go home and do homework.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of going to school if all we're doing is sitting and listening?
Yeah.
And I thought, that's right.
Yeah.
So then I sort of started to see that there was a lot of just this talking at the kids.
Yeah.
Talking. I'm not saying this for all teachers because there's some incredible teachers out there that are so engaging. But there's a lot that are just following the curriculum and trying to tick the boxes and get through the curriculum. And then the pressure becomes about the kids getting the homework done.
Yeah.
And I could see how
Because it's
homework
quantifiable.
was quantifiable. And they're getting the results that they want from these kids, which is just the curriculum is so big and they have to cover so much over their lifetime in the school system. And when I reflected back on my own education to sort of say, well, how much of what I learnt am I now applying? And you're thinking the pressure to teach them all these things rather than wait for them to be going, I'm really interested in that. Like, I want to know how to spend my pocket money and how do I budget it and how do I save enough to actually earn that Lego set that I've always wanted. Like the stuff that they were learning, they couldn't see the relevance of. And I reflected back on that in my own education journey. So, I think there's a lot of tipping points and it's about really becoming aware of where it's supporting our kids' development. And where is it causing them dis-ease or stress unnecessarily? Where might it be taking them away from their intuition, and their ability to speak up and get curious and be a bit more creative? Because there's just so much that they have to follow as teachers that they have to get through. There's just no individual.
I wouldn't want the job of being a teacher. I mean, it's a burdensome job. And I know that we know a lot of teachers and they are feeling that dissonance with their profession because it doesn't look like what did they envisage, which was to, light up young minds.
Correct.
And really be co-creators of that, that evolved thinking that I think kids do possess. I think the thing I love about the tipping point is it can be something really small. And, the reason why I want to share about the uniform, which does seem trivial, but it's not. It's not because of how it was done and I think what was underpinning it, right? The values that underpinned it. And we were talking about that, I know, the other day about how foundational values basically are what it comes down to.
Correct.
But the tipping point, I think we tend to put ourselves in the future and just concentrate on all the things, the difficulties that we perceive to be the case. And there's something beautiful about the tipping point because you've actually, for whatever reason, you've been standing on the cliff top and perhaps you haven't taken the step. Maybe you've lifted up a foot to think about taking a step off the cliff. And then perhaps just a gentle breeze has come along or maybe, a branch has just tapped you on the back and you've just basically been forced into that action where you go, okay, it's time to do something differently. And there is an immediate peace that follows that once you accept the fact that you are at your tipping point, right? Because there's no other option. Because the funny thing was that uniform thing was actually what it did for me was I then understood at a cellular level I could make a decision for my children, which I hadn't thought I was allowed to do. And I know at some point we're going to talk about permission in society because I find it to be so pervasive and fascinating all at once. But I realised I could make a decision about the kids, right? And so what happened was we changed schools to a school that appeared to be the principal at the time said, oh, this is a school kids come to when they want to homeschool or when they've been homeschooling. I'm like, okay, I definitely don't want to homeschool because I want you to know there was no way in hell I was going to be homeschooling, right? I still hadn't got the fourth to school at that point.
Yes.
So we changed schools, and what was so interesting was when you give the kids spaciousness, our eldest turned around and he said to McGill and I, he walked around the school and because we said this is a possibility, what do you think? Because there was no issue at the other school, right?
No.
We hadn't made a big deal about the uniform and we weren't really parenting from a consent point of view then. We were still a little bit, but not as much as we do now. So we didn't give the kids a vote. You know, they're kids, right? They do what they're told. Anyway, QK1 comes over and says, oh, my God, this school feels like home. I've been here before. And we're like, ooh, shivers down the spine. That's really cool, right?
Yeah.
So there was something really nice because then it happened that he recognized that and felt confident to share that with us. And it was so out of left field. Like he didn't normally talk like that. And so anyway, so again, that was so interesting because the tipping point meant that we got to have that experience.
Yes.
Anyway, fast forward 2 years and then the proverbial, poo is hitting the fan and everyone's losing their mind over the sniffles. And what happened was the next tipping point for something that I could not ever have predicted, which was to keep my kids at home by choice and elect to home educate them, was, and again, this is a bigger tipping point, but when all the nonsense was happening and I got to drive my children to school, and then because of my personal decisions, I got told that I could not enter the school grounds. I had to leave my child at the gate, or my children at the gate, send them into the school grounds. And there was a lot going on. And by this stage, I was talking differently in my parenting. So I was more concentrating on where's their mental health at. I had seen what was going on in the community because I had been working in ambulance at that stage. And I was seeing what was happening from a non-emerge response, and I was seeing the isolation that was happening in our society. I was seeing the yo-yoing for the kids of in school, out of school, in school, out of school with the remote learning, whatever you want to call that. It was not remote learning. Anyway, all of that was happening, and I'm like, this yo-yoing is not good for anyone, right? We didn't know if we were Arthur or Martha at that point. And so then to be told that I could not be available for my kids, there was like this invisible barrier, and I was still being a good girl. Like I'm actually quite a gentle disruptor. I really like to go under the radar with my disruption. I really don't want to be out there, with my banner. Yeah. I definitely don't want to do that. I'm like, oh shit, I'm definitely not brave enough for that. But that was a tipping point for me. And I just looked around and I went, is this really, do I consent to this? And I effing do not. And I basically just said to McGill, you're not going to believe this, but this is what I'm going to offer the kids, because if I can't go on the school grounds, they don't get my kids. It's a privilege that I choose to let you people educate my children because my children are awesome and there are plenty of school options, right? They're just good kids, good students. They're the sort that schools love, they're school captains. They're just kind kids.
They get involved in everything. They give things a go.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that as some badge of honour as a parent. They're their own people, but these kids, like they help the environment they're in. That's how I think of it, right? And anyway, I just kind of went, this is a privilege. I don't have to have them here. And so that was my tipping point to go, not that,
Yes.
not that, if that's the only option. And so then it opened up this new way of going, okay, what's the alternative, or what's an alternative that we could do with life that would not be that, that would feel better? Because I think a lot of the decisions we've been making over the last, even, 8 years of parenting have been based on, now I see that product for what it is, or that situation for what it is. I don't want that. And I think maybe that is all part of the deprogramming we need to do as parents, because we're not in that like front foot offensive thing. I think about, the conversation I had with Jill from Rainbow OMG, and she's like come in, I hope she won't mind me sort of representing her, but my feeling is with her, she's come in as that warrior mama, and she just gets it. And I know a few women like that who just come in out of the gates. I'm here for my kids, this is what I'm doing. And I think that
without apology,
without explanation. I mean, if you press her, she just goes, okay, well, this is what I'm doing because my kids are my responsibility. And I resonate with that so much now, but that was not me. Like, I was a real moderate in comparison, and you were too, right?
Yeah, well, because we kind of just wanted to get along in society.
Yeah.
We wanted to be accepted as just an ordinary member of society. And you kind of think, well, nobody likes being a disruptor. Nobody likes to go against the majority of what people are doing. But when you start to realize that we actually have a responsibility to advocate for our kids, well, why would we not do that? Like, I mean, I know there's been plenty of times where I haven't advocated for my kids.
Me too.
And you kind of go, oh, God, that, it might not have felt right at the time, but I didn't understand that feeling.
No, but you feel it, don't you?
You feel it. And once you start to tune into that, you start to actually recognize that that's the universe giving you that message of, hang on, you're in control here. Don't give away your power.
Yeah.
And you start to tune into that, which is what society doesn't allow for us to do, because the systems are there to keep everybody in their lane.
Yeah.
And to keep everybody, to make things efficient, to make things easier, and
that requires compliance.
And that requires compliance. So for anyone who starts to question that, I look back on a lot of tipping points. I was on school council at the time, and I remember putting forward a concern around the EMFs, which is the electromagnetic fields, being pushed out by all the Wi-Fi that's been introduced into the classroom. And I remember,
and that wasn't much back then,
and that wasn't much
now.
Correct, Jesus. Right? And there's so much science that tells us it's harmful.
Yes.
And this was, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And I sort of said to them, hey, have you considered the risks of this? And, I was just shut down, and I was made to feel like I was being a bit, oh, God, that's just silly, a bit over the top. Maybe it's not, there's not enough science to back it up.
Yeah.
And, so you sort of just go small again. But even in those moments, you're kind of going, okay, so this is the environment that I'm putting my kids into every single day.
Yeah.
And then I started making changes at home around, removing that exposure, especially at night time, and moving things around the entire house to make sure that those EMFs are not going to cause them harm. And so then you go, well, but then every day I'm sending them to this environment where they're spending hours each week in that environment. You kind of go, that doesn't make sense either. So,
it's a curious thing, because I think now that we have a level of understanding around, say, EMFs, right? And we don't profess to be experts. I think you know a lot more about it than I do. But I just look at how it causes like cellular disruption, neurological disruption, and you've got all these kids that are apparently misbehaving, and there are multiple factors. But sitting in an EMF rich environment cannot be good for anybody, particularly developing minds.
Correct.
And so obviously we're very privileged because we have space to put the kids outside. We don't live on this shoebox plot that has, 1 by 1 meter patch of grass. Like the
Mm-hmm.
kids have got room to be
Mm-hmm.
amongst trees and in nature. And, you
Yep.
know, I think there's a way that you come into then the grounding influence of, you know, Earth's magnetic field.
Yep.
And so that starts equalizing all those positive ions that are
Mm-hmm.
probably running amok in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that you were aware of that and it wasn't enough of a tipping point. And so I think it's about not to say that, but it's about the fact that there are multiple opportunities where tipping points will come your way.
Yep.
And it might be actually something quite small. It might not actually be anything too massive at all, you know. And it can be as something as tiny as policy on leggings,
Yes.
which just sounds ridiculous out of context, right?
Yes.
But what I want to do is I want to offer some reassurance, because when you slow down your busyness of enslavement, shall we call it, and that's intentionally outrageous.
Yes.
But this busy enslaved life that we have, doing, and very little being, right? Very little sitting in the heart and checking in. What does the heart want? Not what's the mind intellectualizing. What does the heart want? What does the body say at a cellular level? Because it's registering truth and distruth all the time.
Yep.
When you slow down your day by purpose, you will start noticing those opportunities for the tipping point, and you will get to decide. And I want to particularly talk to the parents of highly anxious children and say, you can keep going through what you need to do because you don't feel like you have permission to ask about option C.
Or qualified
To do it. Don't have the qualification or the permission to do that. But if you continue on that pathway, you will end up with almost certainty at a certain destination that does not feel good for everyone concerned. And, you know, is it worth waiting until the shit has hit the fan?
Well, yeah, it's so not. And speaking from experience, it's not worth that. But when we're not used to tuning into what we need because we're so good at people pleasing and fitting in, it's hard to make those decisions. So, you know,
how do you do it now then?
You know, I think it goes back to recognizing when I'm in overwhelm.
Yeah.
And I constantly have a mirror in front of me at the moment of observing and seeing something that I kind of go, oh, I'm not really comfortable with that. Okay, this is an opportunity for me to just go inwards and to go, what can I do right now? What do I need to nourish myself or to be happy with my decisions? You know, I think it's just that quietening down, it's that slowing down, it's that realizing that I'm in overwhelm or that I'm in a place of where things are just not going the way I hope. So, you know, I think it's this slowing down. It's just separating from society's programs.
Yeah.
Just blocking out that noise.
Yeah.
Blocking out all those distractions that we have in this world and just going back to what's the most important thing to me. And that is often being the best version of myself, but also being that example to my kids and allowing for them to have their experiences in a safe, loving, hopefully supportive way.
Yeah. I love that. It's beautiful. And I think that gives us real food for thought. I think slowing down your day, even just to 50% speed, is amazing. It's very powerful. And I think of that as I triage my life. So I work out what the shoulds are and I fuck them off, even if it's temporarily. And just do the basics. And sometimes the basics is not even making dinner. It's actually saying to the kids, listen, you guys are old enough and ugly enough to sort this out yourselves, so can you cook us dinner? So I've actually worked out that I can hand over far more responsibility to the kids, and it's okay that if I'm in overwhelm to honour that as well, because I agree that overwhelm is what makes us make decisions quickly that aren't right for the greater good. And the greater good is in the family unit,
Absolutely.
right? Or as in our life, pathway forward. I don't mean the greater good of society. That's what gets us in this mess.
Correct.
And I'm not suggesting that we all go and do our own thing, but I think that we must start noticing when there is a dissonance in our life, because that will be reflected in the family as well.
Totally.
So, one of the things I do, apart from obviously triaging what's happening, like from a practical point of view, is I notice how my body is responding. And I just trust that so much. I just trust that I'll recognize when it's wrong and when it's right. When it's right, it's easy, right? It's like that honeymoon effect, and it's just everything's beautiful and everything's working and everyone's happy and everything feels abundant and in flow. But it's about recognizing when it's like, nah, or whatever, right? Anything like that, I want to notice that. And I don't necessarily want to take action, but I definitely want to pay attention to it. Because once you put your attention on it, you can't not
notice it.
Correct. Can't not notice it. So it's very powerful. But I really think what I want to do is just say the tipping point sounds scary as shit when you're looking up at being outside your, normal flow. But once you are in that free fall, there is an opportunity to just surrender and have trust. And, we've talked about that a lot from a birth point of view, because there is a very obvious tipping point in birth, in undisturbed birth, where you go somewhere else. And to have surrender and trust in that space is like, oh my God, it's like being touched by the hand of God, or whatever you want to call it. Like, it feels amazing. Out of this world. And you feel like you're part of something bigger. Like, you get that. I think that's that opportunity. And so I think that when you're in the tipping point, it can actually be very similar to that, where you feel that you are part of something bigger, whether it's just a taste of the universal soup, or, a plan that's greater than what you can imagine for yourself and your children. But there is something incredibly reassuring in that moment, like a warm hug that says, I got you. You got this, and I got you.
I just feel, it was beautiful. Hard to close after that, Jodes. But, I just think that we talk about this from a alchemising education perspective, but this happens on every aspect of our life all the time. Like, I think about my husband who's just, quit his job, and you kind of go, there's always that tipping point. And once you've taken the step over, there's I don't know what the percentages would be, but I think very few would ever regret it.
I don't think they would either. I think that's highly unlikely.
Very few moments where you feel like you're just about to take that leap. Rarely do you look back and regret it.
That's beautiful. That's so true. So can we leave you with this invitation, Quanta folks? Even if you don't have a tipping point now, or you can't see where that tipping point would come, invite it into your life.
Yes.
Bring your attention to your heart.
Yes.
Slow your breath down. Clearly put your electrical devices down. And just stop the noise and just invite that into your life. Because who knows where you will be, but, as this wise woman says, you are very, very, very likely to be thankful for it.
Totally.
Aho.
Aho.
All right. Beautiful, Quanta folks.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining me.
Always a pleasure. I love it. Thank you.
We're going to see you next time for another conversation on alchemising education.
Until then, take care. See you soon.
Bye, lovelies.
Bye, gorgeouses.
Hey, Quanta folks. The conversations that we have about alchemising education are underpinned by our amazing Take the Leap course for parents, which is all about deschooling the parents. If you're keen to deep dive more, then check out the QuantiMama.com website and find the Take the Leap course. This course is beautiful because it will give you an opportunity to examine where your programs are, where you're creating limiting beliefs and expectations for your child,
and it ultimately frees you to be the best advocate for your child that you can be. And that's all of us can ever want for our children, just to love, nurture, and watch them become the most incredible individuals that we already know them to be. So more info, head to QuantiMama.com. Beautiful Quanta folks. You know, at QuantiMama, we have a mandate that we feel so passionate about. We want and we are raising the community's vibration and frequency and consciousness through parenting and birth experiences. Such incredible, transformational experiences that will shape you as a person and are the very fabric of life. Do you want to find out how to high vibe your experience even more? Then QuantiMama is your place. Head there for the High Vibe Birth course, ultimate preparation for birthing. Head there if you want to re-engage your child in the love of learning for the Take the Leap course, which is a deschooling course for parents. There's beautiful mind movies, and obviously this podcast is there, and we are here to support you. So head there for all the juice.